I'll now turn it over to Governor Cuomo.
Hey guys, Andrew Cuomo. I have with me Melissa DeRosa, Robert Mahica, Jim Malatras, Gareth Rhodes, Beth Garvey. Let me make a couple of announcements and then we'll take your questions. Today is day 160. New York did 70,000 tests yesterday, and we are at 1%, and that's great news. 5 New Yorkers passed away. They're in our thoughts and prayers. 579 were hospitalized, 139 were in ICU, and 66 intubated. And those numbers are all about flat. So that is all great news, especially when you consider what's going on around us. I mean, you have increases not only across the country, but even in our region. So again, our performance is extraordinary in this sea of spread. Our numbers are great because we're doing what we need to do. The quarantine procedures are all in place, and we're enforcing compliance. Enforce compliance. Local governments still are not doing enough. This is a function for their police department and their health departments, and they have to be more aggressive. I don't know how else to say it. The state has a supplemental task force, state police and the SLA, that is fulfilling the obligation the local governments are supposed to be fulfilling, right? And last night, 14 more establishments were given violations, 3 in the Bronx, 4 in Brooklyn, 5 in Manhattan, 2 in Queens. There's a blackout that happened in Manhattan, 5 o'clock this morning, Upper West Side and Upper East Side. There was about 200,000 outages. The power came back very quickly. Con Ed says that there was a transmission station issue along the East River in Queens, which feeds parts of Manhattan. Con Ed said there was no fire or visible explosion, which there has been in the past. They don't know exactly what it was. They're deconstructing the equipment now to find out exactly what it was. They think it may be tied into problems from the tropical storm, but they're not sure. The outage also briefly halted service on subway lines and Metro North, but the MTA is working to restore that, and by now almost all of the power is back on in those situations. I'm going to send a letter to the congressional delegation with Senate Minority Leader Andrea Stewart-Cousins and Assemblyman Carl Heastie that says to our congressional delegation, in this last piece of legislation, it's critical, and we need federal assistance. We need $30 billion over 2 years for the state to meet its obligations, $12 billion for the MTA. Otherwise, there's going to be increases. And Port Authority, if the Port Authority doesn't get funding, you could see a curtailment of construction at LaGuardia or JFK. Construction at LaGuardia and JFK is even more important now than ever before because that is a significant boost for New York City. And New York City needs a significant boost with all the problems they're experiencing. On schools, today is the deadline to look at the infection rates and make a determination. By our infection rates, all school districts can open. Everywhere in the state, every region is below the threshold that we established, which is just great news. And look, let me say it this way. You look at our infection rate, we are probably in the best situation in the country right now, as incredible as that is. So if anybody can open schools, we can open schools. And that's true for every region in the state, period. Now, every school district has submitted plans to the Department of Health and State Education Department. State Education Department, as you know, is a separate department. It's run by the Board of Regents. I have nothing to do with it. Department of Health has the plans, and if they don't meet, Department of Health can disapprove plans if they're not responsible from a health point of view. There are 749 districts that have to submit plans. Of those 749, 127 districts have not submitted plans to the Department of Health, and 50 of those, an additional 50, are either incomplete on their face or deficient. The Department of Health is going to continue going through the plans over the weekend, and on Monday is going to notify those school districts where it's incomplete or deficient. There may be more than the 50, but it's 50 right now, and notify those school districts who have not submitted a plan. As I said, it's 127 now, but Department of Health hasn't finished their review. They will over this weekend, and they'll make those notifications today and Monday to those school districts. So they are all authorized to open. Again, we're going to watch the infection rate between now and the day that schools open. If there's a spike in the infection rate, if there's a matter of concern in the infection rate, then we can revisit it. But for planning purposes, they can reopen. They then go to step 2, right, which is the local school district has to come up with a plan, and they have to deal with their parents and teachers, which is going to be a more complicated issue than I think many of them fully appreciate. I have been deluged with calls from parents and teachers, and there is a significant level of anxiety and concern. And I've said a number of times, these school districts have to be talking to the parents and talking to the teachers, because if the teachers don't come back, then you can't really open the schools. If the parents don't send their students, then you're not really opening the schools. So to facilitate that, I want the school districts to do 2 things. One, I know where the bulk of the questions are coming from. A set of questions that I have from a policy matter is remote learning and the equity in the remote learning process. We've learned from the experiences we've had during COVID that remote learning can be quite unequal given the demographics and given the circumstances. So I'm going to ask the school districts to post their remote learning plan on how they're going to do remote learning to the extent they are, if they are, in their district. Also, there's been a lot of questions about testing. Most of the plans will say a student comes in, temperature check, and if the student has a temperature, they have to be tested. What does that mean? How is the student tested? Where is the student tested? If there are 20 students who have a temperature on day 1, how do you get those students tested? Where do you get them tested? What happens in the interim? Teachers also want to know how a teacher can get a test. and how would that be done? Different school districts have different theories, but that question of testing for students and teachers is a high level of concern. To facilitate that dialogue, I want the school districts to post their quote unquote testing plan for their school district. So whenever they talk about testing, how will you do that? That's what the parents want to know. How quickly will it be done, et cetera. So that's a second component of the plan that should be posted on the website. And the third, the questions around contact tracing in a school. So if a student tests positive in a class, tests positive. So the student came in, student had a fever, student then got tested. What is the contact tracing for that positive? Do you test the class? If the student goes to a number of classes, how do you do it? And how will the school do contact tracing? Will the school ask the local government to do it? Will the school ask the local health department to do it? But these three areas are the highly questioned areas almost across all school districts. Remote learning, how do you do testing, how do you do contact tracing?